Hi, Barbara. How are you?
Hi, Mayor. How are you today?
I'm fine as a fiddle here. Would you like to take another tour of this historic area today?
I am up for it. It's such a beautiful day, and we're outside the Orlando Brown
Oh,
House.
isn't it great? Would you like to know a little bit about the Orlando Brown House?
Yes, sir.
Well, it's a very famous home here in the historic area. You know, Senator Brown had two sons. One of them was named Mason Brown, and the other one was named Orlando Brown. Well, Senator left the Liberty Hall to his older son, Mason Brown. So in order to make the inheritance equal, he built this very fine home for his second son, Orlando Brown. And he was quite a famous person too, both Mason and Orlando. But we're going to talk mainly about Orlando Brown this afternoon because this is the Orlando Brown House.
Yes, sir. Well, tell me, did Orlando marry?
Yes, this is most unusual too. Orlando Brown married his first cousin, Mary Watts Brown. They had 4 children. They had 2 of them that never married, one that died in infancy, and thank goodness for Orlando Jr. But getting back a little bit to Orlando Brown, number 1 you might say, he was well educated. He graduated from College of New Jersey, which later became Princeton University. He studied medicine for a while. He didn't like it. He studied law and he was admitted to the bar, but he wasn't very fond of it. He liked journalism, so he finally was a part owner of the Frankfort Commonwealth here, and he loved being a part owner and editor of that very fine paper. And he was a little bit mixed up in politics also, because Orlando, this is a rather unusual thing, this is a first really, he received the first colonel's commission in 1838. And you know who he received it from?
Who?
Governor Whitcliffe gave him the very first Kentucky colonel's commission. Also, he was a little bit mixed up in politics because, you know, he served as Secretary of State under the noted, one of the greatest statesmen I think that we ever had, and that was John J. Crittenden. And yes, he did. He had 4 children, and we'll speak a little bit now about Orlando Jr.
Well, did he have kids?
Orlando Jr. had 6 children.
That's good then.
Yeah.
So more Browns.
More Browns, but the thing about it is, of the 6, 4 never married. Isn't that something? 4 never married. One of the men did marry, Sam. He finally married. But I knew the 3 of them that lived here in this house. There was a gentleman by the name of Mason Preston Brown, a good friend of my father's. He was the pharmacist and owner of the Frankfort Drug on the corner of Main and St. Clair Street. He had 2 sisters. The old maid sisters lived here, and their names were Mary Watts Brown and Annie Horde Brown. I knew all 3 of those very fine people. Now, Mason passed away in 1941, and Mary Watts Brown, she passed away in 1946 at the age of 84. And Annie, she passed away in 1956, and she was 88. I knew all of them because I lived just down the street. Well, one of the nice things about it is this. Only Browns lived in this house, and when the last one, Annie, passed away in 1955 it was, she left the home, all of the ground, everything inside of the house to the colonial dames of Kentucky, which I thought was a very fine thing. And they have restored it to a certain degree, keeping it, you might say, in good repair. And actually there was only one room on the inside that has been remodeled at all, and that's the kitchen, of course, to bring it up to date. And you know, one of the nice things they do here in the summertime, Barbara, is they'll have weddings uptown. And after the wedding, they'll have the receptions down here. I remember about a year or 2 ago, they had a very fine wedding out here in the yard. It was sort of on the warm side that
I
day, I well
believe you. I
remember.
probably was.
But they had the reception on the inside, so it was just a real nice affair. Very historic home. Let's go inside and take a look.
Yes, sir.
Barbara, I'd like for you to know my very good friend, Adelia Redmond.
Hi, it's nice to meet
Very
you.
nice to meet
She'll
you.
give us an excellent tour of the Orlando Brown House, I'm sure.
I can't wait. I hear you've got a lot of originals here.
We sure do. We have one of the largest collections of original furnishings, china and silver, that you'll find in most any museum home.
Okay, Adelia, this certainly is a beautiful hall.
Yes, it's got a very federal design to it, large archway, very open at both ends, and of course the same design as Liberty Hall. The houses are designed exactly the same, except a little smaller and in reverse.
I see.
And we have family portraits hanging in the hallway, so it gives everyone the opportunity to meet the family.
Yes, I believe that's Annie, isn't it?
Yes, that is Miss Annie Brown. She was the last survivor to live in the house, and she lived here until 1955. She was Orlando's granddaughter.
Yes, I remember her quite well. She was the last one to pass away because I lived just down the street, you know. And over here, I think this is Mary Watts Brown, and, you know, I think that's an unusual name in a way because Orlando, #1, he married Mary Watts Brown. And now this is a daughter, Mary Watts Brown, who is a daughter of Orlando Jr. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is. And
That's a beautiful portrait.
that was done in 1880 by Robert Burns Wilson,
Oh,
as was Miss Annie's, and they have hung here in the hallway for some time, and these are original frames.
oh, isn't that a beautiful frame, though? Well, let's walk into, oh, before we walk into the next room, I think that you should tell us, I believe this is a picture of, a portrait, really, I should say, of Orlando, right?
Yes, this one was done by Thomas Trevor Fowler, and that is of Orlando. Across the hall from him is his wife, and who is also his first cousin, Mary Watts Brown.
Yes, beautiful portrait. Let's go into this other room now, if you don't mind. Adelia, this is a beautiful room. I think most people would call this the living room, but I believe, don't you call this the public room?
Yes, when these two rooms were first designed, they were called the public rooms, and that is what our living rooms would be equal to today or equivalent to.
Mm-hmm.
These were the most decorative rooms in the house, and this is where the family entertained their guests.
I see.
Mr. Schrock gave the two rooms a very interesting effect with this adjoining or connecting room appeal.
Yeah.
This would give the family the option of a ballroom or two separate rooms in which to entertain. So it actually served a great purpose. And they are, as I mentioned, the most decorative of any in the house.
And of course you have these doors here that you could close off one room. Is that,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And everything in this room, all the woodwork, door, and door accessories are original to the house.
I know that a lot of people, when I've been in here, they quite frequently want to know about the little sofa there in the corner.
Well, that sofa matches the one on the other end of this room. There are two of them. They are original to the house, and they're called a French Empire design, and they're made of mahogany wood. Now, the material that's on them now is a reproduction in a Napoleonic fabric, however, originally covered in horsehair. But they've always been in those two niches.
Oh, I think that's just a great piece over there. And of course the fireplace with John Brown's picture above there is really quite a feature. And over there in the corner, I believe, isn't that Orlando over there?
That is Orlando.
And over here is his bride,
Is Mary, another portrait of Mary.
Mary.
Now, our portrait of Senator Brown above the fireplace is our Matthew Jewett painting. So this is our
quite a famous person.
This is our most famous portrait in the house, and of course hangs above the hand-carved fireplace, which brings out the Greek revival from the frontage of the house.
Oh, that's great. Let's move into the next room now. Adelia, you know, I've heard a lot about this piano. Isn't it one of the oldest pieces that you have here in this fine house?
Yes, it is original. It was purchased in 1836 by Orlando's mother, Margaretta, in New York for $300, if you can imagine.
Would you take $350 for it? Also, I've heard a lot of conversation whenever I come in about the two mirrors, one at the end of the other hall And the one down here, they're mates, aren't they?
They are, and they were called pier glasses in those days. These are two of the original pieces to the house, purchased in 1836 for $160 the pair.
My goodness alive.
Can you imagine? And there was also a luxury tax attached to mirrors according to their size.
Well, you have to pay a lot of taxes because they're pretty good size.
Exactly,
You know?
exactly. And they've always hung in these two rooms, never been moved.
And here's another pretty portrait. Is that Orlando Jr. up there?
That is Orlando Jr., his brother Mason II, as I call him, and their dog Judge.
Oh.
It was painted by John Nagel.
Oh, it's a beautiful. And that frame there, that cost more than $160.
Probably so, and it's original to the house also, original to the portrait.
And I see over here on the desk, I see that you have a book about the Browns. I imagine you've had several people ask you about that book and the history of the Browns.
We do. We have several books in publication about the Brown family. Some of them are a little more extensive than others, but we do have some light reading. The book that is on that desk is of all the portraits that were done in early Kentucky periods. So, of course, our Matthew Jewett and several other portraits are in that book.
Yes. And tell us about the clock. I know that's another famous piece that you have here.
Well, these are French pieces, and they date back to the very late 1700s, and they're solid brass. I believe those were a gift to the house by James Brown, Orlando's uncle.
Oh, I believe he was the one that was held over in France, wasn't it, when Lafayette came over?
Yes, exactly.
They held him as a hostage to be sure that Lafayette would come back.
Exactly,
I
exactly. That
remember
is the
that
one
name.
and the same.
Yeah. Well, let's move into the next room. All right, Adelia, this is another fine room. I believe, again, you call this a public room, and one of the finest pieces I think you have in this room is that desk over there. Tell us about the desk.
Very lovely desk, a butler's desk or a lady's desk, and this is also original to the house. And we display various family members' portraits throughout the year on the desk so that our visitors can get to know them a little bit better,
A
so to
little
speak.
feeling of the family, so to speak.
Yes,
right?
that's what we try to do here, is let everyone sort of meet the family and get to know how a Kentucky
I
family
think
lived
that's
in the
great.
early 1800s.
And I understand that Orlando Jr. was in the Civil War.
He was a lieutenant colonel on the Union side, and he was presented with this Kentucky Militia decorative sword that's on the mantel. This was
Isn't that something?
considered a very high honor to receive.
Yes, I would certainly think so. And over here, I know that you have some dueling pistols. Adelia, tell us about those.
Those were Orlando's. Now, to our knowledge, he never fought a duel. He purchased these in 1820 while he was attending the College of New Jersey, which is now known as Princeton University. And his mother, from what I've read, absolutely threw a fit. She didn't want her son fighting duels. But he told her they were just for target practice.
Just for fun.
Just for fun. That's how he got away with that one.
Yeah, well, I think that's great. Over here, you have some pictures of Paul Sawyer.
We have a very large collection of original Paul Sawyers in this house, and they're all out on display. Our favorite one, which is the one behind me, is called Sunday Afternoon, and all of our visitors really like that one.
Oh, that's beautiful. And don't you have one that you sell?
We do. We have one put into print about every 3 or 4 years, and then sell copies here at the house and also at other Paul Sawyer galleries, Bill Coffey's, to mention one.
Sure.
And he's also, Mr. Sawyer's also painted one of the Orlando Brown house, and we have that on display down here, and copies can still be obtained of that one.
Oh, that certainly sounds good. Let's move into the dining room now. Adelia, you know, dining rooms are always one of my favorite places in a house because I do love to eat. I thought maybe you'd tell us just a little bit about this very fine sideboard you have with the marble top.
It is, again, the French Empire design. It's made of mahogany. And believe it or not, this was used in James Brown's embassy office as a gentleman's drinking board, which is a more refined name for a bar. Yeah. But he again gave this piece to Orlando, and it is very, very fine example of the Empire design.
How about the table, Adelia?
Table is also original, and it's mahogany. It's made in 3 sections and can extend almost the full length of the room, so you could have quite a few in for dinner and be able to seat them all.
You could take some of these out and make it smaller, or you can as I see, another piece down here, you can make it longer, right?
Exactly. So it was a very convenient table to have.
And also, I notice over there you have some original china pieces in that cabinet, right?
Yes, these are the last of what's left of the original pattern that Mary and Orlando used right here in the dining area. And it's an old Paris pattern in a very attractive color.
And over there on the mantle, I imagine you get a lot of requests about how old they are, and also that clock. I love clocks, and that is a beauty.
Now, these argon lamps are two of my favorite pieces in the house because they're so unusual. They're cut glass and brass, and they were made in 1822, and they burned whale oil. Of course, not burned very often because whales were very scarce here in the Kentucky River. The clock, again, is a French piece, and it's original to the house. It's a late 1700. And that clock, unfortunately, right now doesn't work, but we do have several of our clocks here in the house that do tick and chime and keep very good time for us.
Well, I guess that clock had to come from England or someplace like that, don't you suppose?
It's either that, it's either an English reproduction or a French piece.
Yeah, it certainly is a beauty. Okay, let's move on. Okay, Adelia, I imagine that you have a lot of conversation about this bed. It certainly is quite an historic piece, and I believe also that originally it have some steps on it, so because it's so high, you'd have to have steps to get up in there.
It had steps. They haven't survived quite as well as the bed has survived, and it is a solid mahogany bed, late 1700, hand carved.
Hand carved.
And it weighs probably close to 400 pounds. Of course, mahogany, a very heavy wood, and this was considered a guest bed because of the pineapples on top.
Oh.
If someone in your house
hospitality.
Yes, if someone overstayed their welcome, you'd simply remove one of the pineapples and they'd get the hint that it was time to move on.
I see. And I notice over here you still have a little water pitcher for the...
Yes, this is an original chamber piece, and it is the Canton blue. And unfortunately, it's not in excellent condition, but nonetheless a family piece.
Sure is pretty. And also I notice over here on the mantel you have another fine clock, and I do believe it's working.
Yes, this is a white marble French clock, and it was given to Orlando. And the amazing thing about this clock is that when we took it apart to oil it, we found a complete history inside the clock.
Oh.
When Orlando received it, every clockmaker that worked on it, what year they worked on it, and how much they charged. So we had a wonderful resource right inside the clock.
You wouldn't take $100 for it, would you?
No, I think we'll have to let this one stay here.
Okay, you know that Annie Brown was the last one to live here in the house. And of course she passed away in 1955, 56. And I believe this was her room, and this was her bed. Is that correct?
Yes, this is a late 1800 walnut pencil bed, and it was hers, and she did live in this room until 1955 at the time of her death. This room also contains one of the modernized portions of the house, the bathroom addition.
Oh, let's walk over towards the bathroom and see what it looks like.
This was added in the early 1900s.
You know, in the olden days, all bathrooms was pretty large, and this certainly is an excellent example, Adelia.
It's nice and airy and overlooks the garden, and was built up over the back porch, so it really didn't change the structural appearance from the outside.
Was it added later then, since it was...
Yes, it was added in the very early 1900s when indoor plumbing became very fashionable, and it was a must for everyone. And of course, very convenient right here off of Annie's bedroom.
Oh, yes, and I guess Annie lived in this bedroom here, and I guess Mary Watts probably used the other bedroom that we first went into, I suppose.
I would say so.
Yes. And I also noticed that there is a huge bathtub in here.
A lot larger than you see these days, that is for sure.
And it's quite heavy.
It
I
is.
can tell.
Of course, the old porcelains, which we no longer find in the hardware stores today.
Yes, that's correct. Well, this certainly is a nice view out the back window towards the garden, too.
Yes, it would give you a reason to get up in the morning with a good attitude.
Well, Barbara, I hope that you have enjoyed this tour of the Orlando Brown house.
I really did. I was really fascinated with all the antiques and the original pieces in this house.
Yes. You know, I tell people that this is one of the most famous houses that we have. Of course, we know that Liberty Hall is one of our greatest, but I like to tell people, you know, almost everything inside of this house is original because only the Browns lived in this house. So I have enjoyed being with you a whole lot today, and maybe we'll start off in another week or so, and we'll start down here at the Love House, where the first legislature that met in Frankfort after we became part of the Union. We'll start there because that's where the legislature met on November the 3rd, 1792, after we became a part of the Union. As you know, we were the 15th state to join the Union. We wanted to be the 14th state. We wanted to be one of the first after the 13 original colonies. But we dilly-dallied around.
All that government red tape already.
And Vermont beat us. They were the 14th state, but we were the 15th state to join the Union. I hope to see you in another week or so.
Thank you, sir. I've enjoyed the tour today.
Good.